You can listen to The Professional Left on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There's a PayPal button on our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution at P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
This is the podcast for July 27th, 2018. It's not safe for work.
Recorded live and fresh out of Twitter jail, where we never believe anything we read or see really happened anyway. It's The Professional Left with Driftglass and Blue Gal.
Driftglass, welcome home from Twitter jail.
Oh, you know, honey, it was you waiting for me on the outside. It was the knowledge that you were waiting for me that sustained me during my time of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
It really did. It was hard. It was hard. I'm not going to lie. There were many lonely minutes in Twitmo. Apparently, we on the inside call it Twitmo now. So
I see. Good. Wow, yeah. Twitmo. I was surprised, actually, at how many people responded to my announcement that you were in Twitter jail with... Yeah. He popped his cherry. Is that only the first time? Because I've been in Twitter jail dozens of times and so forth. So
Rude Pundit told me that I got his cell, basically. So he was in over the weekend. And it was for, I mean, anyone who's out there who spends any time at all during a day wading through the chest-deep open sewer that is Twitter, because it also does carry trending news and important information and the running catalog of madness of the President Stupid. I got thrown in Twitter jail for referring to Bill Maher as a whore.
Yeah,
that was it. The reason I know that is because they sent me that tweet, and it literally was like 25 characters long. I pointed out that Bill Maher, whoever I was addressing, Bill Maher is not a fool. Bill Maher is a whore, and they said, "Oh no, that's it. That's it. You're done. You're done. You're out. You have to delete it." But I did make a solemn Twitter promise to the warden, because I'm out now on release. I'm wearing a Twitter ankle bracelet, and I'm on home release. And this is a fundraiser, by the way. I need money. I need bail money. I got in deep with a couple of gentlemen inside who provided what they call protection during my stint in Twitter jail. Made me a little more comfortable. The incidentals, the little small things that make life on the inside civilized. But I promised to do two things. I promised either I would stick strictly to the language, the polite, courteous language of the 1970s, what we call the golden age of American civility. A Monty Python skit where they refer to, they don't use the word whore, but they do say loopy brothel inmate and courtesan and harlot and paramour and concubine and so on and so forth. Or since this is a slight against Bill Maher, I promised not to use any language that Bill Maher does not use himself on Twitter.
Oh, good Lord.
And lo and behold, there's a tweet from Bill Maher from October of 2016 in which he's telling Republicans not to let Trump quit. You assholes voted for him, nominated him, handcuffed yourself to this dead hooker. Now drag it to the finish line. Now, for me, whore is slightly less aggressive than dead hooker, but I can see the merits of both. The point being, this was just random.
Mm-hmm.
This was a random. I took this as a random slap on the liberal wrist. It's a brushback pitch. It's we don't want you mouthing off, and we're just going to pick some tweet that you did at some point in your life and say we're going to hold you. We're going to hold you in Twitter jail for that. So big fucking deal. They held me in jail. You can read the body of what I write every day on my blog, which I assure you is a lot more salty and uses bigger words to describe these situations, and has been going on now for 13 years. But I'm out of Twitter jail. I'm on the outside. Everything looks different now. The sky's a little bluer, the grass is a little greener.
I think we could have a much longer discussion about language and use of words and so forth.
Sure.
You and I have both written about the F word, and how we use it and why we use it in certain ways. Mm-hmm. I've had people object to my using the word pimp as being, somehow the wrong way to use the word. And I simply say, look, if someone pimps their book, that's what they're doing. They're going out and advertising their wears that way.
Yes.
Pimp your blog. Pimp. It doesn't necessarily mean in a bad way. It can be, but and whore is the same kind of word. For some people, that might be terribly offensive to say. But sorry, that's when someone does something for money that they would not otherwise do. That is an appropriate term, and it's
the fact that it's on Twitter, where the president of the United States routinely just shits all over the truth every day.
Yeah,
where Milo and clowns like that actually put out death threats on people, where there's just an overflowing sewage, and it offends me both on the personal, practical level, but as a writer. It's just the shit people say on Twitter is so uninspired. It's so dumb. It's so blunt and stupid and coarse. I prefer a really good insult, a really clever insult. But, every now and then you're going to let one fly. The point being that I don't swear in church.
Right.
I know when to use my language, and I know when to use my inside voice, my outside voice. And thus far, I have seen people do amazingly awful things on Twitter and never, ever, ever suffer any consequences. Usually there are people with a byline and
or a blue check mark. Yeah.
And that's pretty much the dividing line. If you have that, if you are a person of note, if you have if you've been legitimized with a blue check and you have a byline in some paper somewhere, you can say whatever the fuck you want.
Well, and don't get me started about the gender divide between blue check marks and not blue check marks. It's pretty damning of Twitter that women who write for hundreds of thousands of people a day online don't get that blue check mark, but some bozo male who's got a byline in a publication and writes every 6 months gets a blue check mark. There is a stark dividing line in gender between who gets the blue check mark and who doesn't.
So Twitter is a public platform run by a private corporation. They can make up whatever the rules they want. Right. They can make them as stupid as they want. I don't care. It's like people who block me on Twitter. I don't care. I don't care. What I care about is the fact that when I make someone on the Twitter angry, like I make Matthew Dowd angry for simply pointing out things he himself has said publicly, and that they make no goddamn sense, and that they're ridiculous, and that he contradicts himself, and he's full of shit, and I back it all up with with the receipts, and that aren't you the news director? Aren't you the chief political analyst for one of the 3 networks? How are you this stupid? How are you getting all this shit wrong? When his response to that, this is a guy who will engage with Ann Coulter on Twitter all day long, who will engage with the worst, shittiest people. As long as they have a blue check, as long as they're, in his club, he will engage with them all day long. But people like this who just block for this because what I'm saying is personally embarrassing to him. I'm not attacking his family. I'm not going after his bald head because I've got a bald head too. I'm not doing body shaming. I'm doing any of that. I'm saying what you do for a living, what you represent yourself as in the world is this one thing, and you're getting this one thing spectacularly wrong, and you goddamn well know it. And the response is, I don't want to hear that anymore. I don't want to hear that anymore. Okay, that tells me a lot. It doesn't tell me anything about Twitter. Twitter is just a platform, a shitty one at that. But it tells me a huge amount about the person involved, that they do not want to engage anyone at the level of holding them accountable for that which they say. And that's true pretty much across the media. Nobody working in that media, by and large, wants to engage at the level of here is what you said and here's why it's wrong, and you've been doing it a long time. Don't you know any better?
Yeah, there's no accountability for the past, and everyone's following the David Brooks rule of you must quote to David Brooks what he said yesterday, but you are forbidden from quoting David Brooks from 6 months ago or any time before that. Driftglass, we have a new sponsor.
We do. We
are being sponsored by a new charitable organization. It's the Sockful of Nickels Upside the Head Pundit Challenge. We challenge you to not say both sides or tribalism for a month. And if you say it, then for charity. It's got to be for the kids and for charity.
It's for America, Blue Guy.
And for America. You're going to volunteer to take a sock full of nickels upside the head.
Yes, yes. I issued this challenge because specifically John Podhoretz. I addressed it to him and a bunch of other pundits because it's a cycle I go through about every 12 hours of please, please, please stop weeping for, oh my God, the tribalism. Oh, the both sides is so very sad. Look, Obama spent 8 years begging your party for the tiniest flicker of compromise or civility, or just not treating him like a plantation owner, not treating him with complete contempt, just dismissive, utter contempt. And they told him to go pound sand, go screw himself, and then they went and elected the king of the birthers. So here's the thing. There is no validity at all to an argument that begins, it's the tribalism on both sides that's the problem. So how about if you want to say that, because apparently that is the only thing you know how to say, because that is your only argument anymore for defending your despicable, treasonous party, you have to take a sock full of nickels upside the head for the kids, for the kids. And John Podhoretz actually answered me and said, well, if it's an ice bucket full of nickels, I'd be willing to participate. And I pointed out, no, the ice bucket challenge is where ice comes and take your kids away from you and puts them in a cage and you never see them again. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, the emotional damage that does to you is actually worse than a sock full of nickels, John. Yeah. So how about you pony up and do the sock? And he didn't want to talk to me after.
Nope.
And I can understand why.
No, I know. But, but you did bring that up. I think that was a very quick on the uptake reminder that his party takes children away and kidnaps them from people seeking asylum.
Calculated and sadism.
Those people who have instituted that policy need to go on trial at The Hague for crimes against humanity. And that's all I have to say about that, because otherwise I'll start crying. I'm not going to start crying.
All I can say is the minute I did this, 10 minutes after I did this, I was in Twitter jail.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're related. I'm just saying they're probably related.
I just have to vent for a minute and say that just for all week long, watching the first 5 minutes of Chris Hayes, where he sort of reminds us where we're at with Donald Trump, I can't believe this guy is still president. Yeah. And if he was a Democrat, he wouldn't be president. He would not still be president. He wouldn't be president. This is a double standard based entirely on the existence of Fox News and a complicit Congress. And I get it that the media is addicted to drama and that they're covering this one jot and tittle at a time with the Mueller investigation and the release of tapes and the desire for, 24/7 news coverage of this. I just can't believe this guy is still president of the United States. This criminal, this liar. It stuns me that we're sitting here and every second that goes by and he's still president, we're doing something wrong.
Yes.
And we all have to kind of bear it. The media needs drama to continue and needs drama to have eyeballs. I don't want my government to be dramatic. I don't want to worry that my government, the government of my country, is corrupt.
No.
Is hurting me and hurting people weaker than I am. And I'm pretty strong and I'm pretty privileged. I understand that. I get that. You and I have education. We're white. We're middle class. We know how to call a lawyer. We know how to write our congressman. We know we are on Twitter. We have how many Wi-Fi connected devices in this house? We are privileged. Mm-hmm. I don't trust anyone in the Republican Party to look after my interests or the interests of my children or anyone with less privilege than me. And I do not understand why we've allowed this to go on this long. It stuns me. And I need an explanation, Driftglass.
Sure. If I may, Blue Guy.
Yes.
First of all, you're now talking to a man with a record, a rap sheet, if you will.
And it's all about you, Driftglass. I understand.
It's very important. We get it all back to me.
Can everyone hear my eyes rolling over here?
Yeah. So take it for what it's worth. But I dispute the predicate of your question, which is we. We didn't do this. We aren't holding this in place. I don't consider the people who have an R after their name and are still loyal to Donald Trump to be a member of my country anymore. They are a fifth column acting against the interests of my country. I agree with you. I want my government to be boring as shit.
Right.
I want it to be efficient and boring. I want it to get, the mail across the country and the roads paved and the streets safe and kids in school. I want it to be as boring as shit so we can do other things. We shouldn't have to worry every 50 seconds that the government of the United States is run by a madman who will just shit all over everything, start a war, insult, run through some sort of racist rant every few hours because his squealing pig people love drama and it makes liberals crazy, and that's why you do it. So I can absolutely believe on an emotional level, I'm horrified. On an intellectual level, I'm not surprised. This is where they've been headed for decades. This is the party that put Newt Gingrich and Rush Limbaugh in charge of their fate a quarter of a century ago. And what did they think was going to happen? And every time another threshold was crossed, another act of treason was committed, another lie was told in public, another administration, the entire Bush administration goes up in flames. The people who were supposed to hold them accountable refused to do it because holding those people accountable is bad for business. It means they're not going to buy your shit anymore. They're not going to buy your fucking newspaper anymore. They're not going to listen to your radio. They're not going to watch your television program. So we can't hold the third of the country that is fucking this country up accountable for anything because they'll stop buying your shit. So instead, we're just going to pretend it never happened, or they're not really that bad, or both sides are to blame. And the minute these parasites got whiff of the fact that they are never going to be punished for anything, you had the perfect formula, the perfect chemical formula. On the one hand, you had a political party who have been engineered to be chumps, who've been taught to be stupid, who've been taught that no matter what the external world tells you, no matter what the police tell you about that man who's trying to sell you the reverse mortgage, the guy who's trying to sell you the shiny kid from the bank who's there at your door. Don't believe the cops. Don't believe your kids. Don't believe that Nigerian prince really wants to give you some fucking money. And despite the fact that you have been fallen for the same scam a million times, they've trained Republicans to be stupid enough to fall for it 1,000,001, 1,000,002, 1,000,003, and then blame liberals for some reason when it blows up in their face again. So they trained 40 million people to be perfect idiots, to be perfect chumps. And to not just be passive about it, to actively reject the real world, actively reject the evidence of their own fucking senses that something is drastically wrong in their world. And on the other end of this spectrum, they taught the media that you're never supposed to talk about this.
Right.
You're never supposed to identify the actual problem, which is the Republican Party is a fucking cancer on the society and has been for decades. They are the problem. Take 20 million Republicans out of the equation and the country gets better. Put them back in, the country's fucked up. It's just that simple. And so we have a business model that says you can never, ever actually identify the source of the contagion. And you have the contagion, which is alert and aware, going, really? You mean I can do anything I want and you're going to give me half of it? I can burn down 15 buildings and you're going to blame liberals for 7? I can shit all over everything, and you're going to let me on the op-ed page of your paper. You're going to legitimize me no matter what I do. Well, fuck. I've been trained to be a moron to believe anybody who tells me anything. So the first thing I'm going to do is elect the biggest con man I can find, who promised me perfect medical care for pennies, who promised to make my country great, who promised me all the oil, to bring jobs back, to get rid of Mexicans, do all the shit that my fascist, racist little heart really wants, and it won't cost me anything. It'll all be great. Because I'm now dumb enough to believe that. And then I'm going to surround that person with people that are entirely dependent on my vote for their livelihood. So you're never going to take me on in the newspapers, which is our first line of defense. You're never going to take me on politically. The best that's going to ever happen is that Jeff Flake is going to write a stern letter and really be very upset about this. And I can have everything else. I can now vote for reality itself. I can now vote to make up, down, and left, right. And there's no one to stop me. There's no one to stop me. So you've trained a fascist, racist, army that it's okay to be paranoid, it's okay to be racist, it's okay to be a thug, it's okay to be a misogynist, it's okay to beat up children, it's okay to take healthcare away from people as long as they're not your family. In fact, it's good. You can laugh about it. And we've given you a con man to run for president who will tell you that everything I just said is great, is terrific. And every time liberals cry about it, that means you're winning. That is the formula. That's what the Republican Party is. And all these assholes on television, you know, the Rick Wilsons and the Charlie Sykeses, who are suddenly shocked to find the Republican Party is full of Republicans, fuck those guys. They absolutely built this machine, and they're all absolutely smart enough to know exactly what they were building. They just never thought in a million years they'd have to pay for it.
Yeah.
They thought they'd be long dead and buried, or that Hillary would win.
Yeah.
And their worst impulses would be checked, and then they could go back into business shitting all over Democrats and blocking everything Democrats try to do, which is the position they always want to be in anyway. Yep. So that's the explanation. I mean, it's not a good explanation. It's, you know, it's the Civil War explanation, that there are millions and millions of fellow Americans who are in a rhetorical and electoral sense armed to the teeth and ready to destroy this country to prove some fucking point. They're immune to reason. They can't be touched with logic. They don't give a shit about the external world. They take every sacred institution from the ballot to the Bible and pervert it to prove their stupid point. And every single time they fuck up, which is every goddamn day, what does the media do? Well, you know how both sides are.
But see, that's where I disagree with you just a little bit, which is,
okay,
I see everything you're saying at the same time. I see lifeboats being built right in front of my eyes. I see it on Twitter. Sure. I see it on other social media where, as I've said on Twitter myself, you know, you Trumpers, you MAGA types need to prepare your I'm an independent constitutional conservative who never liked the tweeting speeches. And they are. They're already preparing that. And one analyst on Twitter, Patrick Chovanec, talked about what a terrible 2 weeks Donald Trump has had since Helsinki, and said what may be the absolute worst thing from Trump's perspective is that the public seems potentially receptive to the very worst accusations that could come out of the Mueller probe, though they are holding back judgment for now. The Quinnipiac poll indicates that very few people would fall off their chairs in disbelief if Trump were credibly accused of colluding directly with the Russians or being blackmailed by them. Many are psychologically ready to believe this. And so they are building their lifeboats. They're building that bridge that says, well, I'm not really for Trump. And already you're seeing it with the tariffs and the farm bailout. There are actual Republican congressmen and senators from farm states standing up to the president. It's unbelievable. Where have you been? But Johnny Ernst is more than willing to say on this one issue, because it comes up against their checks, comes up against their income. No, you cannot bail us out from this. We need the markets. We need to be able to sell our goods overseas. And just inventing money. I mean, this is the amazing thing, too, is inventing the $12 billion bailout of the farms. As if deficits don't matter, money isn't real. We can just go poof, and here it is. From some Depression-era program, we can just borrow $12 billion and throw it out there. But Puerto Rico is still in the dark. The clean water isn't coming fast enough for Flint. So it's just when we need to buy votes, we can invent money. And then the Republicans in these farm counties don't want it. They want the markets. This is falling flat on its face, and they're so incompetent. And again, how can this person still be president at this level of incompetence, at this level of corruption? We've got Mnuchin and some other economic advisors who don't even know what's in Tax Cut 2.0. They're asked on Fox News, what's it going to be? How's it going to make life better for Americans? Well, 2.0 comes after 1.0, you know, like it does. Well, that's like the G6 and the G7. Let's make up something as we go along, as if we've never cracked a book all semester, and it's the final exam.
I don't disagree with you on any of that. But it is a rerun.
Yeah, I'm trying to just I'm trying to figure out what to do for the next 100 days besides register voters and speak out and make sure everybody knows about my specific congressional campaign and the fact that today Rodney Davis, our congressman, is on a stage with Donald Trump. Right? That's happening as we speak.
It is. It absolutely is. And John Shimkus, I believe, is down there, and the rest of the Republican clown show from Central Illinois are down there. I think that, I'm not going to ever influence anybody past, our listeners, and even then, not very much. Or my blog, which that's fine. That should be the limit of what my influence is what I write and what I say and how many people hear it and who disagrees. That's fine. But I think what you and I can do for them and for ourselves really is to just at least understand the historical context of what we're talking about. George W. Bush was at 50% in 2004. And he dropped to 30 and stayed awfully close to 30 for the rest of his tenure for a year and a half later. And except he's the same guy. He had the same incompetent fucks. He was the same screw up. He was the same voters. It was the same everything. There's always the Republican Party really is this irreducible base of 30 some odd percent who were just fascists, who were just racist, fascist fucks. And it doesn't matter what anybody says or does. And I forget who said this yesterday, but it might have been Chris Hayes. I doubt it though. It's because I believe the person was a lot more sweary than this. But it was, I don't give a shit what the Trump voters think. I don't care what they think. They're livestock. They're robots. There's no reasoning with them. There's no point in focusing on them because they can't be reached by reason. The object of the exercise is to understand where we are in this sine wave, I think.
Well, John Heilman was saying that sort of thing on Lawrence this week as well, that no one ever, and Lawrence said the same thing, people quote polls that show 88% of the Republican Party supports Donald Trump in some vague way.
Yeah, so what?
And they never do the math that the Republican Party is at best 30% of the American voter electorate. And so the math is...
We've noticed that for years. I mean, it happens all the time.
Yeah, but it's Nixon's 21% is what you're talking about. Yeah,
and they always, the pundits who do this, who know they're doing it, who know they're basically lying, is they elide, which is a real word, you can look it up, from the percentage of people who support Donald Trump to this grand representation of the American people.
Right.
There is no the American people anymore.
Right.
There really aren't. Geographically, there are. We live within the boundaries of a specific country that is governed by Russia, and I just hope benevolently, because I'm a white guy, so I'm going to make out very, very well in the coming regime. But we aren't one people anymore, and we haven't been for a really long time. And that's, I think it's healthy for us to acknowledge the fact that the Republican Party really does hate this country.
Yeah,
they really do. They really want to get rid of this country and replace it with their country. And their country looks a lot like the Confederacy with a Russian flag flying over.
Exactly. And when you talk about the American people in the idealistic 1950s way, that didn't benefit vast swaths of human beings that live within the confines of this country. Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea that, that this is where we're at now, the same percentage of diehard goons who buy reverse mortgages and dick pills and carpets and cars. So you can't come out and call them that on the TV or or in the newspaper, or they'll terminate their subscription and you'll have to give up your house and go live under a bridge. So you have to keep accommodating this swath of fascist goons who think this is wonderful, who are hilarious. I mean, these are people who never in their entire fucking lives thought they'd be taken seriously because their ideas are so stupid. And now they get play everywhere because the commercial enterprise, the corporate media, is so terrified of losing a third of their customer base, they'll let anybody say anything. And no matter how wrong they are, they'll find a way to put them on stage to mollify that third of their audience. And it's just going to keep going like this until those people, and I mean the people who run corporate media, the people who operate published newspapers, are shamed by their neighbors into stopping this madness. Because it is not true that if you and I, people like us, just ignore them, they'll go away. That's not how fascism works. But if you cut off their oxygen, if you simply don't tolerate crazy racist assholes on television or in print, you don't give them book deals, they will start to die off. Because that's how they sustain themselves. You know, the idea that these clowns, I watched, you and I watched, I think it was this week, on Morning Joe.
Yes.
What's the panel on Morning Joe? Now, Joe Scarborough is a Republican congressman who was elected in 1994 from Florida. He's a fucking Newt Gingrich congressman. All right? And he has been a Republican congressman and who's talked down to the liberals and thought bloggers were idiots for years.
Yep. Cheetos dust. He always talked about the Cheetos dust. Yeah,
we sit in our mom's basement, covered in Cheetos dust. We don't know what the hell we're talking about. Who has also been wrong about pretty much everything his whole life.
He's also a close personal friend of Donald Trump's, who allowed Donald Trump to phone in monthly to his show during the campaign until Donald Trump went after his girlfriend. And so they got into these spats, and he stood up to Donald Trump over the Muslim ban and said it was un-American. He could never vote for somebody who agreed with that. But then he continued to have Donald Trump on his show, propping him up over and over again. July 2016, Mika is on the TV with Michael Steele saying, "Oh, look, Donald's got his groove back." And he talks to people like no other candidate in the history of America. And so there's this constant propping up to make it a horse race, to have Mark Halperin say he could win. We need to make sure that we pay attention to him every month. And he was absolutely the top enabler of the Trump candidacy on cable news. Period.
And what happens when you own the media, not when you're an employee of the media or you use it or you read it or you have your own little blog or your own podcast. When you own the media, you can just eradicate that past.
Yep.
It just never happened. You can just tell Joe Scarborough or have Joe Scarborough decide never to mention it.
Right.
We're just never going to talk about that. And we're not going to put anyone around this panel who will ever mention it again. Right. And no one at this organization will ever mention the fact that Bill Kristol is now a trusted MSNBC employee while he still has the blood of the Iraq war on his hands. And no one's going to mention that because it's in their contract. You don't bring up the shit with Bill Kristol. He's family now. You don't go against the family. So you have to understand this is a puppet show.
Well, and Bill Kristol tried to go against Joe Scarborough one time and got shouted under the table immediately.
You did. You don't
because
cross
Joe Scarborough is a bully.
Yeah. So Joe Scarborough this week wanted to have a debate about the Republican Party. I can think of about 1,000 people, starting with you and me and Digby and Atrios and a bunch of other crazy liberal bloggers who've been at this for a very long time, who would make a lively panel discussion. Just bring your camera to our blogger ethics panel. We have one every month. It's an internet tradition, and we talk about this shit all the time. But no, we're not going to do that. On the left, we're going to have Charlie Sykes, who up until a minute ago was Rush Limbaugh of Wisconsin, who now has a book out that they pimp every – see, there's that word again. Yeah. Every day on your liberal TV station. Because rather than have an actual liberal on who might bring up really uncomfortable facts that predate Joe Scarborough's sudden conversion to an independent, like how we got to the place where he felt it necessary to abandon his party, we can trust that Charlie Sykes is never, ever going to bring up the shit that actually matters. He's a stooge. And he's very well paid to be a stooge. So he's the liberal. The conservative in this discussion is now Eric Bolling. Okay. Eric Bolling, who you might remember, was fired from Fox
for sexual harassment in the workplace. Yes.
Just another disgraced sexual harasser from Fox News is fired. And where do they end up? Where's the sewer grate finally, lead them? Morning Joe.
Yeah.
And so Eric Bolling, it looks like his face has a year's worth of Botox jammed into it, who has, I might add, I believe they mentioned a paperback version of his stupid book to sell. Charlie Sykes has a book to sell. Eric Bolling has a book to sell. So the liberal is going to be the conservative Charlie Sykes, and the conservative is going to be the disgraced sexual predator Eric Bolling.
And here's this sausage factory with not a single woman on the stage or in the studio at the time that the three of them are talking. And then the next day, he has them both on again.
again. And I swear to God, I'm writing this post. I was in jail for a long time thinking this through. But I swear to God, MSNBC is holding tryouts because I looked, and MSNBC still has Hugh Hewitt, the cyborg sent from the future to destroy America, on their lineup, their live lineup. If you go to MSNBC, they still show the incredibly disgraced, humiliated, lying sack of shit Hugh Hewitt as having a show there. Well, there is no show there. So they need a conservative plug into that spot. And I swear to God, it's going to be Steve Schmidt. Yeah. They're trying them out. They're running through tryouts. And for some reason, I have to believe it involves bribery or sexual favors.
That's disgusting.
Eric Bolling is the go-to guy. It must be something that Scarborough owes him from somewhere.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you don't just, hey, you know what? You know who I'm thinking? And you just know that Mark Halperin is now sporting a mustache and going as Marco Halpernio, who's just waiting in the green room going, no, I am not Marco Halperin.
This is such an affront to women that
it is.
MSNBC is giving a morning pass to a guy fired from Fox. It's like, of course, the White House is giving a pass and a communications job to a guy fired from Fox as well. So, there's always money in that banana stand. It's an affront to women that's going on.
And it's open. Yep. It's open and clear. I mean, this isn't a secret. This is not like some big hidden thing. They're doing it out in the open. And that's the thing. That's the real problem here, is the media is so terrified of alienating conservatives in any way that they are bending themselves into origami swans not to mention anything about the fact that this guy none of these people should be anywhere near a public platform. And if we have time, we'll talk about truth goggles and a fascinating sentence that we had today. But this is all introductory to our show. I think we still have 2 hours to go. Right, Blue Gal?
I do want to mention some very fascinating and possibly good news for people interested in justice for Donald Trump. They have summoned to testify the accountant. So Alan Weisselberg, the guy who's on the tape with Cohen, they're talking about, we've gotten with Alan, we're going to get the check going, we're going to get everything right. This is the guy who has been Trump's accountant since the 70s.
It's the third rail of the Untouchables.
It is.
Got the accountant.
Get the accountant. Mm-hmm. And he has been summoned to testify in the Cohen case. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be bad.
That's the Chicago way. Sorry.
It's the Chicago way. It absolutely is. And this is where Cohen went for the money. Mm-hmm. This is where Cohen gets the money from Trump. Over under on Jim Jordan being the next Speaker of the House, Driftglass.
Well, a 0. Because
I don't understand why he's still sitting in the Congress except for corruption.
Yeah, well,
corruption is
your
the
own question. Everyone, it's the bunker, the Third Reich as the Third Reich falls. They're all down there. They're all partying. They're all hysterical. They're all protecting each other. They're all pretending that Army Group Steiner will save them, and it won't save them. But they're all just like, fuck, it's the end of the world. Why not just do anything we want? And that's Jim Jordan. Yeah. So why not run for the Speaker?
Yeah. Let's go through our news dump. You want to do that next, or what do you?
I'd like to. Well, first of all, there are 100 tapes.
Yes, there are 100 tapes. Let's get that out of the way. There are 100 tapes.
Not one, not 10. And I don't really want to dwell on the one that they have. People have been, zaprudering the one Michael Cohen tape to death. Not my job. There's a whole bunch of other shit going out there that's much more important. But the fact that there are 100 tapes and they're coming out is pretty impressive. And
every time something happens in this case, I always turn to you and say, Michael Avenatti is going to be impossible now. Because he's always proven right. Every 5 minutes, he's being proven right.
Now that he's running for president, I think he's going to be truly insufferable.
Oh, Lord. There's another person who's not qualified to be president. We want qualified people.
There's a lot happening in immigration. It's all bad.
Yep.
There's still children in cages. The Trump administration is trying to make using public benefits ground for deporting legal immigrants.
Yeah.
There are actually rules in place for this already. I actually work with an immigration group here in this area. I learn a lot at every meeting. One of which is there are rules. You're not allowed to have public benefits access to them for 5 years, but your kids who may be citizens are exempt from this. So if you're poor and you're working and your child needs immunization or food stamps, they're eligible. But the Trump administration is trying to make their eligibility grounds for your deportation.
Yeah.
Which is just, again, absolute calculated
monstrous.
ICE agents are now routinely lying on incident reports. So just writing down shit that isn't true so that the people will not be credited with actually seeking asylum, which is what they're doing. The deadline for reuniting families, the Trump administration, this recording is on Thursday, they're going to blow it. The deadline for reuniting the families, they ripped apart. They've also failed to document consent in the majority of cases where migrants were deported without their children. They just did it. That is a true, what you're looking right there is a true police state. It's the Trump administration testing out what an actual police state looks like, where they don't have to obey any rules at all because no one's going to hold them to account.
And their voters love it.
Their voters love it. Their voters love it. They want to, I don't know who this crazy woman was, not crazy, a Trump voter today or yesterday, who was swooning over the fact that Donald Trump rules with an iron fist.
Iron fist, she said. Yep.
And to keep the wealthy farmers quiet, they're going to pay him $12 billion in bribes because wingnut welfare, baby, is everywhere.
Except that as I said before, the farm state senators don't want that.
Sure.
So it's going to be a hard pass on that one, I think.
I do
the
want
Trump administration just took an actual sincere step to fix a piece of Obamacare and restarted payments under the risk adjustment system, which should help ameliorate sort of the explosion of rates that we were expecting this fall. Again, I think that's another bribe, another acceptance that politically they can't do this and they can't make healthcare that much more expensive for Republican voters. And frankly, I think Donald Trump is behaving this way. People have been asking me on Twitter, why is he doing certain things? First of all, he's incompetent. So asking why he's doing something is stupid. But number two, if he has a motive for things that he's doing, I think he is so obsessed with keeping his base happy that he's more worried about a primary challenge from a Kasich or anybody else and making sure that his base sticks with him than he is about. He thinks he can steal the general election the way he did in 2016.
Sure.
So,
well, and in that regard, there's a great deal happening this week with the release of the highly redacted version of the Carter Page FISA warrant. And here's everything you need to know about the FISA warrant. It's the new Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
It is full of shit that absolutely Republicans are lying to their base about, knowing their base will never read it. So, it's full of spiders and goblins. Those horror stories. It completely exonerates Donald Trump and proves that Jeff Sessions has been right all along and that Rod Rosenstein is a cult member of a warlock and they sacrifice babies. And let's face it, the Republican base, as we have gone into at great length, are just robots, are just livestock. They'll believe anything they're told. They're never going to read it. They're never going to look it over. They're just going to nod their head and go, Sean Hannity told me that this thing exonerates. Just like the Affordable Care Act was full of, death panels.
Right.
Which didn't exist. And a bunch of other horror stories that never were. They knew their base was never going to read this shit.
Yep.
They were never going to pay. They just take, very much like their Bible, they're going to take what the man in the suit at the front of the room tells them as gospel, never question it, and run into the streets screaming about the great liberal conspiracy. That's all you need to know. The warrant was well considered. It passed muster with a number of judges, all of whom were Republican.
It's 412 pages of evidence. And
it was documented up one side and down the other.
And it had to be renewed over and over again. So...
None of which matters to Crazy Uncle Liberty, because Crazy Uncle Liberty is dead from the neck up. That's all he cares about. I would like, I don't know if it's too hard of a left or right turn. I do want to recommend a movie that we saw.
Yeah, and other podcast listeners recommended to us, and we went to see it at our $5 Tuesday night. Sorry to Bother You. Amazing movie.
Amazing movie.
Yeah.
Love that movie.
And
can't talk about it.
We won't spoil it at all, but do look for a Professional Left podcast Easter egg. It's in there.
Yeah, there's one in there.
There is one in there.
My wife gripped my arm. I said, yeah, I
just saw it. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Oh, my God. And it owes so much. I mean, without spoiling it, it owes a lot to Putney Swope. It owes a lot to Back to the Future. It owes a lot to Soylent Green. Brazil, yeah.
Sort of the the only other person I could see making this movie, Boots Riley, made this movie. His first movie. It's wonderful. If you took the best of Spike Lee and the best of Terry Gilliam,
and had a baby,
that outsized wild social commentary that's also science fiction, and also just absolutely relentless, but never stops being entertaining. That's what this is. It's a magnificent movie. And what we did want to mention also, because our sponsor last week, you might recall, was Non-Custodial Parent Cinema Productions, which is all the harmless, robot dog shit that you see. If you go see Ant-Man and the Wasp, you're going to sit through 30 minutes of previews for robots and dogs and robot dogs and princesses. And it's all very happy and friendly because the people who are going to see that movie are there to put their child down for 90 minutes to be the non-custodial parent movie.
Right. And keep them occupied. Right.
Previews other than Tyler Perry's Das Boot, which I sort of remember. I'm not sure if that's true, but other than that's not really. There's some Tyler Perry movie that's I'm sure will do very well.
$2 billion.
I will never see it. I don't particularly care for any Tyler Perry movies. He's a better actor than he is but he knows what he's doing. All the other previews were uniformly about social justice, police violence, actual problems facing African American and minorities in this country, pretty bluntly and clearly. There are two separate movies about police shooting young black men.
And one of them is The Hate You Give, which is a book that our youngest child and all her friends have read. Mm-hmm. So, it's this year's Fault in Our Stars, right? Takes the position, is spoken, narrated by a young teenage African-American girl. And so you see everything through her eyes, and it's the perfect book for people youngest child's age and her friends, and they discuss it, and it's got social issues in it and police killings and so forth and so on. And now it's going to be made into a movie. Uh-huh. And so it's not as if these films don't also have a market. No. And don't also have a place to make money. They do. But it's a totally different audience, obviously, for Sorry to Bother You than they expected at Ant-Man and the Wasp. And so the previews are very different. And so that just tells me, Driftglass, that you and I need to see fewer blockbusters and more art films.
Can I tell you a very quick funny story that happened today?
Sure.
Because youngest child was cleaning the bathroom, as we forced her to do every week.
No, we don't. But
just cleaning the bathroom. And I was working on a post that on Jeff, Congressman, what's his name? Jeff Tucker. Why can't I think of his name? Jeff Flake.
Jeff Flake. Oh, Jeff Flake, who will write a very stern letter to Donald Trump.
Because there's this wonderful bit from the movie Friday about I got mind control over Debo. And it's Chris Carter just after the bully leaves, he stands up and talks about how he really does have the situation under control. He's a complete coward, and it's a hilarious movie. But this is a movie with Ice Cube and Nina Long and Chris Tucker from I think I said Chris Carter. I apologize, and a whole bunch of other people who were launching their careers and wonderful careers. This is a movie that was made in 1995. All right, that's many years before youngest child was born.
Right.
Youngest child doesn't know what Casablanca is yet, and I'm working on that. But I'm playing this clip, trying to find the right spot. She looks at me and goes, "Is that Friday?" I said, "Yes." She said, "That's a good movie." I said, "Really?" Uh-huh. And it was made like years before. She goes, "I know." And she looked at me like, "I didn't know you knew that movie." I looked at her like, "I didn't know you knew that movie." Yeah. And we had a moment. Yeah. We had a special stepfather or stepdaughter moment.
Yeah.
But it's we have books all over our home. Mm-hmm. Our walls are not lined with great art, and there's not a lot of wall space.
Our walls are also lined with great art, but it's art by my mom and dad and middle child.
Yeah. So we do try to make sure that we're not. I mean, we're privileged, white, middle class, middle Western people, but we really do try to make sure that we have an open ear to everyone and really do understand, where our country truly is. all the people in our country, all the groups in our country, and who are getting screwed by the Republican Party. And that means understanding people who aren't like us.
Yeah.
And it thrilled me to death that youngest child was just completely, familiar with a vocabulary that at her age I would not have been familiar with.
Yep.
That tickled me no end. Anyway,
I will let you know something else, Driftglass. Last year, the college where Junior Dude is going, they have Augie Reads. This is Augustana College in Rock Island, Illinois. And Augie Reads is the book that the entire freshman class reads when they come into school. So they all have something to talk about in seminar during freshman week. Right. And last year, when Junior Dude was a freshman, the book was Hillbilly Elegy. This year, it is Ta-Nehisi Coates. Yeah. It is his book. So, progress is being made. And I don't mean to diss Hillbilly Elegy because there was a lot in that book that was well worth knowing. But The Space Between Us was, is another one that I can't wait to hear what people, when an entire campus reads that book, how that changes things and how that sparks conversations.
Meanwhile,
so we're working towards integrated schools. That is something I think too that needs to be said. Ta-Nehisi Coates was with Chris Hayes talking about, how do we make things better? What do we do to make things better in the future and so forth? Integrated schools. Both of them said that immediately. Integrated schools. That's how you start. Once you have a child till they are 7, you have them for life. And if they grow up as a young child with minority schools, where Ball Charter, where both Junior Dude and youngest child went to middle school, it's 51% non-white. So growing up with that changes your perspective. And I've been having conversations today, too, with people because this is not a major news story, but it's gotten a lot of attention. Betsy DeVos's $40 million yacht was unmoored by vandals.
There's something just perfectly in that metaphor.
One of our writers, Scarce, did a post about it, and it was what we call a throwaway post. It didn't take a lot of work. Put up a video, write a little bit about it, post it. You don't have to analyze what happened. This is what happened. And immediately it had like 1,200 shares. And so I hope I'm not talking out of school, Scarce, but Scarce texted me and said, what the hell? I guess Betsy DeVos gets attention, Well. And I explained to him the story. I know I've told this on the podcast before, of the 7th graders who were doing Scholastic Bowl, and the topic was the U.S. cabinet. And a lot of them got different questions wrong, but every goddamn one of those 7th graders knew who Betsy DeVos was. Yes. They knew she was the Secretary of Education, and they knew she bought her job. Yeah. They knew it was corruption. And so go teachers, go public school teachers who made sure, goddamn it, that their students knew who Betsy DeVos is and what she wants to do to your school. And there's something about school that is so incredibly personal to people. It is. I think it is. That you and I can talk about Steve Mnuchin and corruption and his, hot trophy wife and her private plane trips and so forth. And it sort of, it hits certain people the same way it hits us, but it's not Betsy DeVos. Right. Betsy DeVos hits everybody right in the gut. Well, she is so fucking incompetent, and she bought her job, and she's a multi-billionaire, and it just, there's something about her existence that just gets people infuriated in a way that other corruption doesn't.
It is the opposite of what students are literally being taught at those schools, which is achieve, respect, do your hardest work. The best people should win. People should be generous of spirit. We should help each other. And running the whole show is this inherited wealth, clueless, racist dilettante who bought her fucking job because she wanted to show it off to her friends, like her boat.
Right.
And
right.
it's like healthcare.
And she wanted to profit by turning schools into charter schools. She wanted to personally profit from it. Yes. Yes.
I'd like to talk just 1 minute about truth goggles.
Let's talk about truth goggles. I just want to add a little thank you to Barack Obama for all he did while he was president to encourage public schools and to encourage integrated public schools and to go to public schools and read to kids and talk to them and be their dad.
Mm-hmm.
That deep breath.
That happened.
Yeah, that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you want to talk about Truth Goggles, which is a hilarious post over at Driftglass. He reused an old Photoshop of his.
I did. All Photoshops come back. This was the week where David Brooks wrote a column which includes the following sentence. If I would advise on democratic narrative, okay, stop right there. I'd start with 3 premises. First, by 2020, everybody will be exhausted by the climate of negativism and hostility.
Mm-hmm.
No. Second, no. Been doing this a long time. It's only getting worse. But what he's really saying is let's forget about the whole matter of who stabbed who in the back and who stopped the bleeding and who's responsible. Let's put all this behind us and just make sure that I get to keep my privileges.
Yep.
That's what he's trying to say. And so in the shadow of that, I was reading through this wonderful piece at the Columbia Journalism Review. And about halfway through, I went, uh-oh, this is not going to go well. And it didn't go well. The guy who invented, a guy named Bill Adair, who invented the truth-o-meter, has noticed of late that he's having problems with it.
There's a certain segment of the population that doesn't care if the truth-o-meter is accurate or not.
He thinks it's still effective for many readers. I'm quoting him now. But I've come to realize that in our polarized environment, oh, God, the meter I invented is not reaching everyone and not reaching conservatives in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it. My personal experience is exactly this, that it doesn't matter how many different ways I tell conservative colleagues or friends or acquaintances X, Y, and Z. It doesn't matter how many times they lie. It doesn't matter how many times I debunk their lie. I go over to Snopes or I go over to PolitiFact and say, it took me 90 seconds to look this shit up. Why aren't you looking this up? Why do you keep falling for the same shit? And the response is always, well, Soros is this funded lefty Soros site. Blah, blah, blah. I don't have to believe anything. I don't have to. And after literally decades of doing this, it's very clear that these people are not interested in anything that contradicts their biased, racist worldview. And we'll keep going back to the same liars over and over again because every time a lie blows up in their face, which is every day, they always say the same thing, which is both sides do it. Liberals are just as bad. Both sides. So the guy who invented the truth-o-meter is finally sort of picking up on the fact that conservatives don't give a shit about the truth. And they actually resent the fact and feel affronted by the fact that there's this thing out there that says whether or not a factually based assertion is true or not. A little bit true, lot true, pants on fire, and so on and so forth. This is bothering him. So I'm like, okay, that's cool. I'm with you. I'm with you so far. And he does say that in the eyes of many conservatives, fact checkers are no longer just lefties providing the news. Now they're self-proclaimed authority deciding who's lying. So again, we in the reality-based community are just like, well, this is really what happened, and you can 2 and 2 is 4, and that's the way of it. And conservatives are so far down the Orwellian rabbit hole that they cannot acknowledge simple objective reality anymore without flipping their lids. So I agree, this is a problem. But what he plans to do about it is funding a project called Truth Goggles, which will experiment with new ways of presenting corrective information. Based on the predicate, and I say in my post, this is the sentence that broke journalism. Needless to say, fact checkers can't afford to alienate conservatives.
Oh, my God.
And I just went, wait a minute. And as I wrote, it's the needless to say that makes it hard.
Yeah, and you need to send that to Stephen at home, too. Stephen Colbert needs.
Well, it's It's so fucking perfect because he has this sort of little machine that says, true, false, sort of, completely, et cetera, et cetera. And the people who lie all the time, who depend on a constant infusion of lies all the time just to get up in the morning, are bothered by this. Well, wow, you just noticed that. That's great. But his solution is, we're going to make a phone app. and we're going to put emojis on it. And this is, again, a quote, it'll be tailored to user avoid certain phrases or evidence that the user is likely to viscerally dismiss. And that's when I just went, okay, I'm done. I'm done. Now, as a tech guy, I used to write code. I've written many a shitty application for users who said, I want it in blue and I want it now. And I tell them it's not going to do what you think it's going to do. It's not going to solve your problem. They didn't listen. I made it for them anyway. So if you want someone who thinks that your basic project is stupid, and you're throwing money around, I will take your money and I will come on board as any of a number of job titles, which are highly negotiable, because I've done time in Twitter jail, and it's hard for me to find work these days. So,
again, it's all about you, Driftglass.
but it's this thing. It's this horrible infection right at the core of journalism that says, well, we can't make conservatives mad. And that's because conservatives figured out long ago that if you just keep punching the ref in the kidneys until the ref shits blood, eventually the ref will stop calling balls and strikes against you. Yeah. They just keep punching. The mainstream media will get a moron like Chuck Todd to be in charge of Meet the Press. We'll get people who won't ask any questions of anyone, people who will feel obliged, like it's their sacred responsibility to give half of the op-ed page to Ann fucking Coulter. Yeah. And at that point, they've won because they're legitimate. And the idea that you're going to bring them back to the light with an emoji-based thing that won't use words that'll make them mad is just the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But it's based on the same theory that David Brooks keeps using, which is if we just compromise a little more. Yeah. If liberals would just be more civil, if they just find a different tone, if they find different adjectives, if they'd find a word that's less harsh than lying sack of shit whore, then maybe the lying sack of shit whores will climb down out of the stupid tree and become model citizens who will listen to reason. And after doing this for decades, I'm going to tell you this hard truth that is never going to happen, ever.
Yep. Driftglass, I've got a quote for you, and then we got to get to our news roundup and end this beautiful podcast. Here's a quote for you. If you can't keep the promise to your family, if you can't keep the promise to your wife, if you're lying about your affair repeatedly, why should the American people trust you when you say you're not lying to them?
Such a good question, Blue Gal. I'm going to say that came from either Edmund Burke, possibly Aristotle, some great thinker, some deeply moral philosopher who would, of course, be horrified about the existence of Donald Trump, much less the fact that he's president of the United States. Right? Am I right? Am I right, Blue Gal?
Yeah, this person's not talking about Donald Trump. They're talking about John Edwards, and it's Sean Hannity.
Oh, no. A different Sean Hannity, right?
No, the same Sean Hannity 10 years ago. Yep.
It's been camping out in Donald Trump's underwear for 2 years now.
Right.
That Sean Hannity?
And pillow talking with Donald Trump every night. Yeah. While Donald Trump and his wife sleep in separate bedrooms and apparently watch separate TV networks. So
right. Just like Rob and Laura Petrie. So
right.
But see, the reason that doesn't count, Blue Gal, is you forget it happened in the past.
Yeah.
And the past is whatever Donald Trump says it is.
And memory is the liberal superpower. I want to do a shout out to Donnie Mountjoy on Twitter. I had tweeted earlier today that this Alan Weisselberg, who's the accountant, has been summoned to testify. The tweet said, loyal Trump executive Alan Weisselberg has been summoned to testify before a grand jury in the Michael Cohen probe. And Donnie Mountjoy replied, let's just see how fast we can have quotation marks slapped around loyal. Thank you, Donnie. All right.
You want to do a quick spin through the news?
Yeah, things we haven't talked about already.
Sure. Trump is concerned that Russia will be pushing very hard for the Democrats in the midterm elections. Yeah, because that's, and it's always opposite.
Above reproach, Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows introduced articles of impeachment against Rod Rosenstein, along with 9 other congressmen. They only got 11 congressmen to sign on to it. And it's not a privileged thing. Pretty much Paul Ryan just kind of threw a wet rag over it. But it's shameful that they did that.
It is. It is, and they're going to go right back to work tomorrow, embarrassing the country again. This is the week that Alex Jones threatened to kill Bob Mueller, which is exciting. In a related story, Facebook said that Alex Jones' rant does not violate his community guidelines. Because let's remember, people, Facebook is a giant advertising site,
and Facebook lost more money on the stock market today than any other company in the history of the stock market in one day.
Yes, they did. Because people are starting. Wait a minute. Facebook is a giant advertising delivery platform to deliver my eyeballs to people who want to sell me shit and lie to me. Really?
I don't like that.
That's a terrible thing. But maybe we don't like that. Today, I think it was today or yesterday, that Donald Trump hid from the press corps, which is kind of cute.
Yeah,
I mean,
he said it was the weather, and he got in a car instead of the helicopter, so reporters couldn't shout questions at him about, paying off a Playboy model on tape with your own attorney. Yeah, he just hid out. We're back to Russia's interference in the 2016 election being a, quote, big hoax.
Yeah, so it depends on, what hour of the day it is. It's either I reluctantly and through gritted teeth agree that this actually happened, or it's a big hoax. Yeah. He's a lying sack of shit. What do you want? And he that makes his base really happy. Everywhere he goes, see, Sean Spicer has enough money to buy his way, or the people who are backing him have enough to buy him a book deal and buy him slots on TV shows. But they can't buy the hosts of those shows away from roasting him like a pig on a spit.
Well, his book sucks.
His book is terrible, and it's full of factual errors, and it's a lump of trash. But it's a lump of the reason conservatives write books is because then you give them money. Yeah. That's the exchange. No one as far as I know, no one actually reads this crap. No one reads Ann Coulter's books. They're a way to exchange a bit of labor on her part for bulk buy wingnut welfare and credibility on the editorial pages of American newspapers.
Well, and they're a splooge rag for a lot of young conservative men to have, Ann Coulter books, or we know what that's for. Okay.
That's true.
All right. A multi-state lawsuit challenging the inclusion of a citizenship question on the 2020 census will be allowed to move forward in court. Please don't forget to vote for your Democratic Attorney General if one is running this term. That is very important.
This week, Donald Trump screamed at his staff because Melania's television on Air Force One was tuned to CNN.
Yeah.
And that's a no-no in Trump land.
Yeah, she watches what she wants. The First Lady's office released a press release saying the First Lady watches whatever channel she wants to watch. Mm-hmm. A federal judge granted immunity to 5 witnesses expected to testify in the Paul Manafort trial. None of them were household names. Many of them were related to banking and giving him $16 million loans in exchange to become Secretary of the Army or related to that job offer. Yeah.
He's going to jail. Betsy DeVos, previously referenced in this podcast, is rolling back the Obama-era loan forgiveness rules for students who were defrauded by for-profit colleges.
Because she's a bad person.
She's a very, very bad person. I won't call her that other word.
And yacht paint is expensive.
It is.
Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services will resume risk adjustment. We talked about that. Jeff Sessions laughed and joined students at Eva Braun High School. It's not really Eva Braun High School.
No, I got that wrong in my notes. I'm sorry. That's on me.
Yeah.
That's on me. It's a typo.
But the hearty chant of lock her up from high school students who don't know better, and Jeff Sessions could have said stop it, and he just chuckled.
Oh, I see my mistake. It was the Leni Riefenstahl prep school. So,
all right.
So this is the week that Trump threatened to revoke the security clearance of the former officials who criticized him for political reasons, which happens in a lot of totalitarian states and is absolutely not supposed to happen in our democracy.
And then the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, said Donald Trump is just trolling you, which is now the level of Republican leadership that we have.
Yeah, it's the shrug. What am I supposed to do about it? I'm just Speaker of the House. Yeah. What am I supposed to do about it? Well, you can leave in disgrace and never
come back. And this is your president who is trying to distract people from the Russia probe. That's what's happening. Yeah. Those security clearances, that's an inside the Beltway concern. Who has security clearances and who doesn't? And to play that when they did, everybody just followed that along like a dog with a treat. Oh, we have to cover this with with wall-to-wall coverage of security clearances discussion instead of talking about Trump and Russia and talking about Putin deciding he's not going to come to Washington. He's going to diss Trump on that. This is they're being played. And so, in a way, Paul Ryan is right. You are being trolled and you are being played. And it's time for them to stop being played like this.
I'd like to do one Illinois story. We have
let's do the last one before we go to Illinois news. 71% of voters of all political stripes believe Roe v. Wade should not be overturned because the 1 out of 4 women that has had an abortion, many of them are sitting in the Baptist pews, folks.
Yep. Sitting next to you in church.
All right.
So not very long ago, this is the Illinois story that had national implications. Governor hedge fund Bruce Rauner's union busting pal Mark Janus sued Ask Me and won. That's the Janus decision. That's the union busting decision that the conservative Supreme Court passed, and he won. Now, at the time, Janus said that he really loved his job. I'm quoting him now. "I love my job. Serving others is part of who I am. But in order to do this type of work, I'm forced to check my First Amendment rights at the door. That's why I've asked the U.S. Supreme Court to step in." Well, apparently...
So is his First Amendment rights to not pay union dues?
Right. Apparently he didn't love his job that much. Because you know where he works now, Blue Gal? You just guess. Just take a wild guess where he works now.
For the Rauner administration?
Awfully close. August 1st, he'll be joining the crackpot right-wing libertarian Illinois Policy Institute.
Oh, my God.
And the Liberty Justice Center, which has a name that just screams patriotism, as a senior fellow. And he will be set for life. The Illinois Policy Institute is where Bruce Rauner dumped a lot of his money.
Yes, he did.
A lot of crackpot local millionaires and billionaires put a lot of money in there because it is the thing that liberals don't have, which is lots of billionaires funding think tanks that crank out white papers that get quoted on the newspaper, that crank out
legislation that gets introduced into the State House, by Republicans.
And they crank out pre-written press releases by the ton, which once you've fired all your journalists, you have to put something in the paper, so they just often do a rip and read. They have an Illinois Policy Institute guy who has a column in the local paper, and that's how they poison the groundwater locally.
By Rauner's money. Right.
So once again, the circle of wingnut welfare life is complete. You go to the Supreme Court, you do my bidding, you crack the unions, and I'm going to give you a job at a place for life, for a ton of money, for which I don't know what your job title is other than thank you very much, here's a lot of money. And this is, again, part of the infrastructure that conservatives have spent 30 years building that liberals with deep pockets, for some reason, just won't do. Or won't do well. I don't understand it, but the consequences of not doing that are all around us.
Thank you, Driftglass.
My pleasure, Blue Gal.
Each week, we post to our Facebook page and website an Internet Kitty sent in by you, the listeners. This week's Internet Kitty is Hemingway, a.k.a. Hemi. Hemi is definitely a cousin to our black cats. I showed you a picture of Hemi.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, wow. It's very similar. But Hemi has the added gift of many toes. We do love polydactyls, and we welcome Hemi to our Facebook page and website. Thank you for sending Hemingway in, and you can send your Internet Kitty to us at our email address, proleftpodcast@gmail.com, where you can also write to both of us. Feel free to write us. We love hearing from you. Be aware that if you write us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service. Go Postal Unions. Letter on the air unless you say otherwise. Don't forget our gourmet coffee guideline. If you can afford to buy an espresso-based beverage, iced or hot, for yourself, buy one for us. This is not charity. This is our job. I received another email asking me which is the best way to donate. There is no best way to donate. We get Patreon money once a month. We can access PayPal money. We only access it once a month because we do it as a payroll. I mean, we are paying ourselves as a job with PayPal money as well. So it really makes no difference to us which way you donate. People who don't want any money to go to anyone but us, mail us a check. If that is inconvenient for you, if the best way to do it is online, PayPal and Patreon and GoFundMe are all there. So Whatever the easiest way for you is the best way for us. Thank you very much.
We also take cash, scotch, and
yarn.
So.
Approximately 1% of our listeners support this podcast with a contribution, and you can too. See our website, proleftpod.com, for details. Both our PayPal, our postal address information is there, as well as our Patreon and GoFundMe information at proleftpod.com. Please share our show on social media, and thank you for doing that. Hey, Driftglass, how are the Internet Kitties doing this week?
Oh, Blue Gal, the Internet Kitties are so sad that Twitter has banned the use of the word whore, just as the Maria Butina, the spy who knobbed me story is getting really good.
Let's think about living. Let's think about loving. Let's think about the hooping and the hopping and the bopping and the loving, lovey-dovey. Let's forget about the whine and the crying, the shooting and the dying, and the fellow with a switchblade knife. Let's think about living. Let's think about life.
Professional Left podcast is recorded under a Creative Commons license. Copyright 2018, DGBG Productions Incorporated.